Hello, friends. Father Scott Vanderveer here with another in our series, Seriously, God? This time about the cross. The cross was not just the most shocking, upsetting, unjust, and absurd thing that ever happened in human history. The idea that God would come to earth and be assassinated, executed by humans for the crime of blasphemy. Not only was the cross the most awful thing that humanity has ever done in the history of the world, but it also represents for all of us those things in life that are just too painful for words, too unfair, too absurd, too unthinkable. And yet, almost everyone has times in their life that are all of those things, that are the most awful of life's experiences. The great American writer Ernest Hemingway was once part of a contest that involved the challenge to write an entire story, a complete story, in as few words as possible. And he won that contest with a story of 6 words. And the words were, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Oh, the pain of those words. How could 6 words contain so much pain? For sale, baby shoes, never worn. We have so many things in life that are beyond description. And we would like to believe that they are so rare that it would be like lightning striking for us to have to go through them. But since we all know someone, some family, we're all just 1 degree of separation from somebody who has lost a child to death. We know that the unthinkable sometimes does, sometimes can happen. And so often when it does, people will say, where's God now? How in the world could you say that God loves you, that there's a good God in charge of the universe, if you're going through this? Fill in the blank with whatever this is. How in the world could you possibly be going through this? It's too much. It's too hard. Obviously, either there is no God, or God is not powerful enough to act, or there is a God and God is powerful, but God is not kind enough or compassionate enough to care about your incredible pain. People who are deeply rooted in their faith, people who have been through struggle, know better. They know that life dishes many, many things, and we can't always make sense out of why things happen as they do. But we can understand that life can present absurd situations that do not reflect on God's goodness. They reflect on the complexity of life. And maybe when we get to heaven, we'll understand all things, as some of the scriptures promise that we will. But this side of heaven, we are called to understand that God is so far beyond us, God's ways so high above our ways, that we must simply trust. We must be willing to surrender the need to understand. One spiritual author has said that there are many people who come to religion because they're afraid of hell, and that there are many other people who are in religion because they've been through hell. Which of those describes what brings you to faith? Are you someone who goes to Mass each week because of fear of God's just punishments, as we say in one translation of the act of contrition. In another translation, we say, I'm heartily sorry for offending you, Lord, because I fear the loss of heaven and the pains of hell. I fear your just punishments. That could express for many of us that we come to religion primarily because we're afraid of hell, of the loss of heaven, of consequences from not being faithful enough. But there's an awful lot of us who may fall into the other category more accurately, that we are people who have been to hell. We've experienced hell in our lives on earth. And that's why we are people of faith, because we have been through hell, and our faith is the only thing that brought comfort to us as we were going through the dark valley. Many of us are troubled when religion gets reduced to simply like an insurance plan that people have to save them from some unpleasant outcome in the afterlife. It's almost like having fire insurance. But for those of us who have found that God has been most present in some of our darkest moments, that it was when we were the most abandoned, as the prayer and the poem that is so famous to so many people goes. It was when we were most alone in the walk of life, when we look at the beach where the footprints of life are recorded in the sand. We see that so often in the darkest times, there's only one set of footprints. And in a moment of despair, we could say, Lord, why would you allow me to walk alone in that most painful, most awful part of the journey? And it is then that God says, I never allowed you to walk alone in any part of the journey. In those dark and sorrowful parts of life, in those stretches of the beach when you were most in pain, those were not your footprints in the sand, they were mine. Because it was at those times that I carried you. Some people come to religion because they're afraid of hell. Other people are devoted to their faith because they've been through hell and they realized they were being carried by God along that stretch of beach. So today we wrestle with the absurd things of life, the moments when the unthinkable happen, when we are faced with nothing but God's promises and no consolation to know that they will come true. At the time of this recording, I'm thinking about the people of Ukraine. I'm thinking of a recent bombing of a railway station where at least 50 civilians were killed. And in the wreckage of the missiles that were shot at the station, written on the side of one of the missiles was in Russian a hastily graffitied message. It simply said, for the children. This missile was intended for the children of Ukraine. It was intended to hit and kill children. To live through that is the cross. That is the absurdity of people taking delight in the unjust slaughter of the innocent, which is exactly what happened on Good Friday, wasn't it? It was people screaming, we want Barabbas, crucify Jesus, crucify him. We don't want him, we want Barabbas. The soldiers jeered at him and mocked him. If God loves you, why doesn't God save you? How could you be the king of the Jews? Where are your supporters now? How could the people of Ukraine not feel some version of that as they are mocked by the force that is seeking to annihilate them? It is an those moments, not despite those moments, but in those moments, we are called to deepen our trust in God, to strengthen our resolve, to intensify the power of our faith. The cross is not something that we could ever take lightly. It's not the kind of thing that becomes easy to bear when someone gives you some kind of platitude or says some kind of slogan at you. You know, it's not the kind of thing that some of the old time-tested, just buck up and you'll be okay kind of bits of advice can ever help us manage. The cross is the thing that crushes you. It's the thing that killed Jesus Christ. And it is what takes life from us as well. The cross is the thing that we would never choose. But when it comes, we cannot avoid. It is the moments when we feel most abandoned by God. As Jesus himself said on Good Friday, my God, why have you abandoned me? So, let us enter this Holy Week with an awareness of the tremendous, paralyzing power of the cross. And let us remember that while we will not be rescued from dying, Jesus' resurrection saves us from death. We will find our way through the crosses of life. Religion is not just for those afraid of hell. It is for those who are going through hell, for those who have been to hell and back. It is a resting place, a refuge for all who are overwhelmed by the absurdity of life, but who choose to trust that God, the same God who raised Jesus from the dead, will see us through our trials also. May God bless you all.